What's going on, everyone? And we've got one of my favorite videos to make where we dive into the full pre-release for set 6. And mind my other compatriots behind me, we're gonna make this into a meme, and we're gonna see how many by the end of, I don't know, a year from now we actually have in the background. Maybe there's gonna be +4 and there's gonna be 7 of me on the screen, which is perfect. But I'm referring to my old video on the pre-release here, whereas the strategies still have not changed at all. And we're going to be diving into overall themes that we're going to want to pay attention to, as well as actually opening up a couple of packs and building decks and getting in some games with them for today's video. That said, let's start off with a big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon, as we are going to be doing our own little pre-release here shortly. And let's dive into some common themes regarding pre-release. So there are a few common themes regarding the pre-release that we really want to focus in on. And each one of these are kind of in scaling priority. And we get to start off with the leaders category. So in Star Wars Limited, this is one of the unique things about this game, is you're going to have a leader that leads your deck. Now in pre-release, this means that you're going to be building a 30-card deck. You're going to be given 2 of the starter leaders, which is generally going to be whatever is revealed beforehand, so Palpatine and Padme in this case. You're going to have to open 6 packs, build a 30-card deck, choose a leader to run it, and you kind of want to have a leader that matches a lot of the cards you have. So here are some things to think about when we're thinking about leaders, because it's arguably one of the most important factors, since it's going to be a guaranteed thing as part of your deck or on the board at any given moment. The first thing is the heroism or villainy decision. Do you have more heroism or villainy cards? Which one is the more powerful version? Since if you're playing a heroism, it completely cuts off basically all the villainy cards, since you don't want to be paying 2 additional resources for them. Mind you, there are some cards that are worth it, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Color combinations. Maybe you have some really powerful cunning cards, but a leader that you want to play is command, but the majority of your card pool is vigilance, which means that they may lock out certain leaders because the cards that you currently have don't match the leader aspect, or maybe a leader so powerful that the aspect that they are is worth going into because the leader itself is so strong that it's going to carry your whole deck. And that's kind of the third part to this, which is, yes, you want to pay attention to how many heroism or villainy cards. You want to pay attention to the colors that you're working with or aspects, because those are the 2 oftentimes biggest decision makers when you're opening packs and you don't even know what cards you're going to be getting. But you really do want to consider how powerful that leader truly is, because if that leader is so powerful to where their action or their stat line or whatever they're offering is going to win you the game, as long as you have a reasonable amount of cards to play from, yeah, just load up that leader and then make it work, right? Just make it work. And that kind of leads into the second quality of pre-release, which is quantity. You really want to make sure that you have the quantity of cards in the pools that you're playing. There's going to be the main aspect. Now, the main aspect of your card pool is going to be the one that has the most. Doesn't mean I'm specifically talking about heroism or vigilance or what your leader is. Whatever your card pool gives you, let's say you have 20 cards in command. Command is now your main aspect, period. You're going to want to focus in on that, and then you're going to choose a support aspect. What does that support aspect mean? It usually means a card combination that has the most powerful cards or something that works well with your main aspect. Because at the end of the day, we need to build a 30-card deck, like I mentioned, which means we need enough cards so that we're not paying 2 additional for every single card because it doesn't fit our aspects. So you want, oftentimes, the best way to go about this is to have a leader that matches your main aspect, because then you can pick whatever supporting aspect that you want. Because the cards are that powerful, I just slot them in. Oftentimes, what happens is you have a card pool that's really amazing, and the reason why you choose a secondary color or the support aspect is because of the leader and the card pool within that leader's category. It usually is the case, especially in sealed, because you don't know what you're going to open, and there usually is one aspect or 2 aspects that has the most playable cards. Okay. And as we're talking about the supporting aspect, generally the supporting aspect comes from, well, the power level of that supporting aspect. You really have the main aspect just because it's the pure quantity of cards. It's going to fit your main aspect. It's going to fit your colors, and you're not going to be paying extra for the majority of your cards in the deck. That said, there may be an aspect that has 6 or 7 cards that you've opened that are really, really powerful. And that's what usually is your decision. So how do you evaluate a power level? Well, generally, the majority of it is going to come from the commons and uncommons. Because you only get a couple of rares or a few rares and maybe a legendary if you're lucky in your packs, you need to evaluate the commons and uncommons and how truly powerful they are, because that's the majority of your packs. That said, there are some packs that do have a rare or legendary that what we consider is a bomb. A bomb would be something that is so powerful that it's almost necessary for your opponent to deal with immediately, otherwise they will lose the game. Or when it comes into play, it already does something so powerful that it immediately puts you ahead. Oftentimes, a supporting aspect is determined by the power level of a couple of cards, either in the common or uncommon area, or a rare or two that is really a cut above the rest. Of course, this is backed up by the synergy of your overall pool. If you have something that's, let's say, if we harken back to set 5, where we had force based cards, if we had a bunch of force units that was generating the force, and then you had a card that was really strong that worked with the force, well, boom, marry the two, and suddenly you're playing those force cards that's generating the force, and then you've got your force payoff, which is already powerful, that synergizes with the rest of your cards. And this is, again, an evaluation that you have to make every single time you go in, because some sets have some amazing bombs that completely win the game for you, and other sets, well, you're going to find most of it within the commons and uncommons and the synergy of the set. Another thing that can kind of determine which supporting aspect you want to choose might be the interaction level of your deck. Now, in Star Wars Unlimited, it is unique in that you have this space/ground setup. So if you have an opponent that's going all space or a lot of space, which is most often not common in limited because there's limited space units, you're going to find that it may be hard for you to interact with those units, because oftentimes the way you deal with opposing units is by attacking them with your own. And if you're in the ground arena, well, suddenly you can't really interact with those space units. And sometimes the space units might just be a turn 1, 2, 3 that maybe, or turn 2, 2, 4 that has restore. And that just consistent chipping in of damage will cause you to lose the game. So you want to make sure that you have at least some way to deal with some space units and some way to deal with ground units and have a reasonable split. Usually like a 20-80 split is not uncommon in limited. You have 20% of your units be space units and 80% of them being ground units. That's just oftentimes how the set is set up. On that note, one of the other ways to interact with your opponent is sentinels, putting up a roadblock where your opponent has to attack them before attacking your base. This can be really useful, especially in combination with certain leaders and especially in combination with certain upgrades to really prevent your opponent from getting any valuable trade that they really want in. And of course, the last thing is removal. Now, in this set, removal is very few and far between, so it's even more premium in some cases. But sometimes you might pick a supporting aspect just because, yes, maybe the cards themselves aren't directly powerful, but because they can kill any unit of your opponents, they're immediately powerful because now they deal with your opponent's strongest thing. And that in of itself is a powerful card. And lastly, when building a deck, we want to evaluate our off color or off aspect cards. Yes, like I mentioned earlier, the main consideration should be finding a main aspect that has the quantity of cards you're looking for, with a leader that either is in your main aspect or a supporting aspect that has the power level of cards that you're looking for to support that main aspect, maybe with a good amount of synergy that has a little bit of interaction, all the things I mentioned before. But then usually, because sealed is the way that it is and you're opening only a certain amount of packs, there are a lot of times where all the cards that you're choosing from in the aspects that you've chosen add up to 26 or 27 cards. So you might have 3 to 4 cards left over that you might want to add into your deck. And because the way Star Wars Unlimited allows you to resource any card from your hand, oftentimes these off color or off aspect cards are just resources, no big deal. And then in the rare few cases where their niche spot comes up, you can play that card. And this also applies to, by the way, not just off aspect cards, but also cards that may not have universal purposes, and you're kind of considering whether or not to play in your deck. You can always afford 2 to 3 to 4 slots at the end of your deck to put those cards in. That's not really going to harm your overall power level. The question always is it worth the cost? If I'm slotting in an 8 resource unit that is off aspect, that suddenly costs 10. Are you going to be getting to 10 resources in limited often? Absolutely not. Maybe it's a 4 resource card that is a really good ability. Will I pay 6 for it? Maybe it's a 5 resource or 6 resource unit, or an event that's super powerful. Will I be playing that? Maybe. It's really about the power level of that card. And again, you don't want to go too many off color cards, because if you have too many and you're drawing, multiple of them a turn, it may just be that you can't really play anything that turn, or you're playing something that's really not ideal because you're paying 2 extra for a card that really shouldn't cost 2 extra. And that's kind of the decision you need to make. So it really has to be only a couple of cards finishing out your deck that you have the option always to just resource as you go along. That said, I'm going to say goodbye to past versions of myself, and we're going to dive into some decks, or specifically some packs, and build our own pre-release deck for you all. All right, so we're over on Force Table, and if any of you have used this program before, you kind of know how this works. But for those of you that have not, this is a nice program that allows you to play against bots. If you subscribe to their Patreon, then you can go ahead and use their sealed and draft portion, which is pretty cool. So I'll leave a link to this down below if any one of you want to get some practice in for your sealed deck. And we've got, Secrets of Power as a beta, hopefully. And we're going to go ahead and open packs as a pre-release here and see what we manage to get. So let's go ahead and open up our first pack, and immediately I'm excited. The first thing I want to look at with my pack is my leader. Since all the leaders you're given are yours, this is one of those leaders, if you guys watch my pre-release leader tier list, that I rate very, very highly. Arguably one of the best, because you're going to be able to really get a ton of value from her just by putting experience tokens on her. So I'm really excited about Leia. The next thing I want to look for is, the majority of colors, right? So right here, immediately I'm seeing a lot of aggression cards, and my rare, and in this case, legendary actually, is aggression. So that's something that's kind of exciting to me. And so I'm looking at colors, and I'm also looking at the rarity, right? Because we have all these commons, but my uncommons are here, and then usually the legendary / rare are in the back. And Nemec's Manifesto is one of those cards that is actually pretty good. Yes, you're not going to have a ton of rebel units in your deck, but a 1 resource upgrade that gives +1/+1 is actually just totally fine to play in limited. So I'm actually pretty excited about that. In terms of my uncommons, the Renowned Dignitaries is totally reasonable. The Wilrow Hood, rather, can be decent if you do happen to have, some upgrades. But other than that, there's nothing too crazy around here. I'm really just excited about the fact that I have, a lot of aggression cards that are mono aggression. So if I have a villainy leader that I'm excited about, great. Not to mention the colorless cards. I mean, these can be played in any deck. Oftentimes it's just curved fillers. So aggression, pretty exciting. Leia as a leader, also pretty exciting. Following that up, we've got Colonel Yularen, a totally fine playable option. As a 4/6, totally solid. This is somewhere around B tier on my list for me, but really, it's going to be about, kind of generating a couple different units to be able to attack multiple units on a single action with Yularen. In terms of the actual cards in the pack, again, if we're going to look at our rares, and we've got Topple the Summit, which can be a little bit awkward in limited, because oftentimes if I'm playing a card like Leia, I'll have extra value on my units by generating experience tokens for them. And so I'm not really looking at playing Topple the Summit because it'll just damage my own units, right? So not really all that exciting. Senator Chuchi, on the other hand, is, pretty decent, 2/5 official in Vigilance Heroism. The other card I'm looking at, right here, Charged with Murder. Disclosing double vigilance can be a little bit tricky, but defeating a damaged non-leader unit, that's one of the interaction pieces that we were talking about. On top of that, we've got, a bunch of command cards. Nubian Starskiff is a perfectly reasonable space, which I'm looking for. Beloved Orator can create a couple of units. The other card I'm looking at, Outer Rim Constable, defeating upgrades can be decent. And Unveiled Might. Upgrades are always something that I'm interested in limited, just because, sometimes when you put it on a leader, it's very difficult for your opponent to deal with anything that you've got going on. So Unveiled Might is kind of exciting. Let's move on to pack number 3 here, see what we've got. Daedra, another leader that I am pretty excited about. Something that can get you a little bit of value with the front side action of just paying 1 to deal damage or draw some cards. But then more importantly, she's a really early deploy that can put a lot of pressure on your opponent. 4 damage a turn, it can be a lot. And there's oftentimes ways that you can get that rolling. In terms of, rares, uncommons, Arinda Price, 4 resource, 4/4, defeating another unit. Usually the defeating another unit portion is not going to be all that relevant, because the way you win in limited is not by kind of rushing people down most of the time. in terms of, defeating your own units at that point of the curve. So Arena Price is kind of like it's an okay card. Crucible, on the other hand, amazing. Coming in and giving a ton of experience, putting a space unit into play for 6 resources, really, really solid. Outside of that, I mean, really no main color here. I guess Naboo Security Force can go with my Crucible. Slymore is another uncommon. This can be pretty solid in terms of, being a defensive card. We've got a couple of other ones in colorless, right? Like Assassin Probe, Inspiring Senator again, as well as some other kind of curve filler here. So Crucible's exciting. That kind of goes with the Unveiled Might potentially. So we got a couple things going for us there. Let's go and open the next pack, see what other leader we get. Another Leia, like I said, I'm pretty excited about that one. So totally cool there. We've got a Luthen's Hallcraft as a rare. This can be pretty awesome. A 5/3 is a very aggressive space unit. If you're able to disclose the double aggression heroism, it's a discard 2 cards from your opponent's hand. That can be devastating at this point of the curve. So this is actually a very, very powerful rare that I can see getting a lot of value in limited. We've got, a couple different kind of value pieces. Elia Kane is honestly just solid. You get to go ahead and take out some plot cards potentially. We've got another Unveiled Might, which I'm excited about. More aggression cards like Academy Disciplinary and Contraband Starhopper. Again, these are perfectly fine cards. 2/3 space unit, great. 2 cost, totally fine turn 1 play. Resource cost is oftentimes something I'm looking at as well to make sure that I can play everything or something on every single turn. So yeah, aggression seems to be a very, very solid aspect for me based on, a couple of different rares that I've gotten in the heroism category. Academy Disciplinarian can work with the Contraband Starhoppers that we've gotten, and I could even potentially play Unveiled Might out of aspect. It seems crazy, I know, but that card seems pretty solid. So let's move on to pack number 5 here. And we've got Dryden Voss, a leader that I think is pretty weak, forcing you to discard multiple cards from your hand to get some value going. And I think that's going to be really, really tough. On another note, we've got special modifications as our upgrade here. +1/+3 gets you a spy token. Not exactly all that great. On another note, Cadel can be really, really good defeating upgrades, getting rid of experience tokens, or like the Unveiled Might that your opponents are playing, who has a 3/2 with plots. Kind of come down a little bit later. I'm actually really excited about things like Imperial Dark Trooper. Just these really solid statted units on turn 1 can be really, really powerful. This one, definitely a weaker set. We've got a couple space units that are pretty solid, like Consular's Cruiser or ISB Shuttle is totally reasonable. FN Trooper Corps is actually a really nice villainy card, coming down and giving experience. Rebellious Functionary, I don't really like the 1 resource 2/2s, although in Leia, this could be a 1 resource 3/3. We have to remember that because of the Leia action. So 1 resource cards are actually a little bit more exciting. And even something like the Gonk Power Droid, we can go ahead and get some value out of, because usually people can't deal with a 3 toughness unit on turn 1, or turn 2 rather. So honestly, lots of interesting cards here. I'm still leaning towards aggression, just with the cards I've seen here. But let's move on to our last pack, and we will see what we open. We've got Slymore as our final leader, which is totally reasonable. Nothing too exciting going on with Slymore, but decent stat line. Has an on-attack trigger that gets you some value and a way to generate some spy tokens. So so far, Leia has been pretty exciting, and Yularen are the 2 that I'm most interested in, because Yularen will give me access to those Unveiled Mights if I really want to go that direction. That said, what do we got in our rare slot? We've got Newt Gunray, which is actually a pretty powerful card, giving some Sentinels out, and it's a grit unit, which means we can really, really get a very, very obnoxious unit with Newt Gunray here. We've got a couple other cards, like Shadow Crawler is actually a really, really good common. It's a 7 cost unit, but it's got Ambush, so it comes in and immediately gets some value going. I really like that card. Another Elia Kane, Armor of Fortune can be a nice vigilance upgrade here. We've got Covert Operative. This can come in and just capture something. Republic Warwalker, just a big fat unit later on in the game, is always a nice finisher in limited games. So far, I mean, again, aggression looks great with the Academy Disciplinarian, but command's coming up with the cards like Shadowcrawler and the Unveiled Mights that we've seen so far. And then, of course, we got some upgrades to choose from. So now that we've opened up all of our packs here, let's actually see what we've got going on. Fortunately for us, in the Force Table setup here, we can actually see them divided up by aspect and divided up by cost. So it's actually really, really convenient. Let's go ahead and move myself over to the right-hand side. Starting off with aggression, we've got 13 cards in just aggression. We've got 4 aggression heroism cards, all of which are very, very solid. And we've got essentially 2, because I'm not counting the leader, aggression villainy. So immediately, if I'm looking at aggression, I'm looking at probably aggression heroism, And that means that I have, probably 17 cards that are totally playable. Like I would probably play all of these. Pursue the Leads, maybe not that great. So the first thing I'm looking at is quantity of cards, right? For each aspect. And then maybe do I want to go with a leader that matches that, etc. So I have 11 cards that I'm happy playing. I'd play the top of the summit just because it's a very powerful effect and it could be good in certain circumstances. Pursue the Lead, I might play one of. So, if you want to bump that up to 12, plus the aggression heroism. So that's 16 cards in aggression. I'm leaning towards heroism. Yes, I would play these. So I have 16 in aggression heroism and then maybe 14 in aggression villainy. For command here, which cards am I really looking at playing? I would definitely play the new boosted security forces, Raxian Assembly, Crucible, Cruiser, all looks good. Jar Jar, I would probably play. I don't think I would play Budget Scheming unless I had the right spot for it. Senator's Aid, I probably also wouldn't play. And Thunderous Applause, I'm not super excited about. So really, I have like 1, 2, 3 cards that I'd probably consider, and maybe Reconnaissance I wouldn't play. So 4 cards, so maybe 11 command cards here. And then I have 4 command heroism, although the Renewed Friendship is not that powerful. The spy tokens can be decent. Return a card can be okay. I might play one of those just because, the chances that you're going to be able to want to return multiple cards from your discard pile is very rare. So I might play one of those. So we'll say 3. So if we have 11 command cards that I'm interested in, plus 3, that puts us at 14. In terms of the villainy side of things, I would play all 3 of these. So, we have 3 cards here as well. So again, 15 command. For cunning here, really, there's some good ones in here. I'm not sure about the regulations. Bureaucrat, action could be potentially decent. I really like Duchess's Investigators. I think this is a really powerful common. So I think that's something to note. I'd probably play the A-Wing, especially if I was playing Leia, for example. Cicatro would be totally fine. Wrong Ride, I think I would still play this just as a nice solid plot card. So I think that's totally fine. And then the Undercover Operation, maybe. So I'm looking at maybe 10 or 11 cards, probably leaning towards 10. 0 Cunning Heroism, and then 2 Cunning Villainy. ISP Agent isn't particularly strong, and Lurking Snub Fighter's okay. So pretty light on Cunning. I mean, we're looking at maybe 10 Cunning Heroism, and then like 11 Cunning Villainy. For Vigilance here, this one's also pretty light. Bardotan Ornithopter, coming in as a 3/4 spacer that draws you a card, is totally reasonable. 4 of them is a lot. Charge with Murder is also, something that interacts with people, which I do like. The Scour the Archives is one resource way to draw an upgrade. I think this is actually a totally reasonable event depending on how many upgrades you're actually in your deck. But Defense Fleet X-Wing is okay, nothing too exciting. I like Donnie Pilgrim. Again, these 1-drops are a little bit more appealing to me because I have Leia. Because I can go ahead and play them and give an experience token to them in most cases. Disciples Devotion, also, pretty interesting to me. I think all of these cards are reasonably playable, but I would go down to like 9 Vigilance because I don't know if I would play all 3 of the Bardotan Ornithopters. So we're looking at 9, 10 Vigilance Heroism, and then all 4 of these Villainy cards I would absolutely play. And so that means that we've got like 13 Vigilance Villainy cards. Mind you that we also have Chancellor Palpatine and Padme because those are the baseline leaders. In terms of heroism and villainy cards, our villainy pool is much stronger. Elia Kane is pretty strong as a 4/6 or 3/6 with raid 1. Plus we can potentially disrupt the plot cards. We got a 2-drop here, and the FN Trooper Corps actually is pretty strong. 4/5 that gives an experience token is pretty nice. Our heroism cards like Crate Veteran, Covert Operative, and Heroic Arc 170 are playable, and then we've got quite a few neutral cards. The question is, now, aggression and command are 2 aspects that I'm really interested in. If that's the case, okay, then how do I want to go about it? Because my leaders right now, if I was going to play a command leader, it would be Yularen. That's pretty much all I have access to. I can go command villainy, aggression, but I would lose out on some powerful cards like Nemec's Manifesto and Luthen's Hallcraft, but I would get access to some pretty strong ones in like, Academy Disciplinarian, the AAT Incinerator, and more importantly, our villainy pool is actually a lot stronger with Elia Kane's and FN Trooper Corps. If we look at our cards up here, we actually don't have a ton of like that late game powerhouse in terms of 4 and 5 drops. Like we do have a couple of them that I'd be interested in playing, but not a crazy amount. Not to mention things like Jar Jar can do some work in a Yularen deck. I also have Daedra as the other option. So Daedra Command could be really, really solid as a very aggressive style deck. And I could see that being very powerful. However, FN Trooper Corps is a 5-drop, which means I can't really get value out of plotting it. But I can play things like Unveiled Might onto my Daedra to, get in really, really aggressive and go to town that way. Not to mention, my Academy Disciplinarians actually work with Daedra, which is kind of interesting on that note. So I think there's really 2 decks that I'd be interested in here, and we'll go ahead and build both of them and see what we can do with them. I'm going to start off with a, I think I'm actually going to start off with a Daedra, more aggressive list. Because of the Academy Disciplinarians, that means we can put in a lot of pressure on our opponent very, very quickly. So I'm going to start with that, especially with Republic Auric Starfighter and Contraband Starhopper. Top of the summon can do some work with Daedra dealing damage to things. So let's go ahead and start with that and see what we come up with. So let's go ahead and close out our card pool. Let's go ahead and build our deck. We'll start off with Daedra. And then we're going to go in, view as images. We're going to build a green command deck. Because that is where most of our cards are, and there are some powerful options in there as well. Going into the ground category, we're going to want all 3 Academy Disciplinarians. The AAT Incinerator is something that I think is going to be potentially pretty strong, and I'll play the Arinda Price since we are a little bit more of an aggressive deck. I'm going to play at least one of the FN Trooper Corps, and I will play both of the Elia Canes because it just is a really nice static unit. We have a nice 2-drop here in Imperial Dark Trooper. Same thing goes with the Gonk Droid. I think that's totally fine to get some discounts on things. Jar Jar Binks can be a nice little plot option, so I'm just going to go and slot that in. The Warwalker, Raxian Assembly, and the Outer Rim Constable, I'll play at least one of these, maybe 2, depending on what our curve looks like. Sith Assassin helps with our curve, though. And then a Shadow Crawler is a nice late-game ambusher. Out of the other cards here, something like a Raxian Assembly, or rather, not Raxian Assembly, but the Naboo Security Force, the Inspiring Senator, and the 2nd FN Trooper Corps could be options alongside the Cruel Commandos. I'm actually going to slot in the Cruel Commandos. Sentinel Overwhelm is just good. It is just good. Moving on to the space units, we have, double Contraband Starhopper, really nice because it's super cheap. So right now we have 2, 3, 4, 5 turn 1 plays, 6 turn 1 plays, which is really, really solid. ISB Shuttle, 3/2 space unit allows us to create a spy token. Controlling official units in the Nubian Starskiff is going to give us Restore 2. That seems solid. I like the Republic Auric Starfighter since Academy Disciplinary readies it up. Enforcer Squadron is a nice aggressive space unit. Crucible can give us some experience tokens. And then honestly, Consular's Cruiser seems good as well. I want both Unveiled Mights. It works well with Daedra. And then in terms of kind of random cards that I might want to play in addition, Top of the Summit seems good. I would definitely play that. This is one of those decks where budget scheming might actually be solid. Academy Disciplinarians an official. Let's see what else I have that are officials. Jar Jar Binks is an official. Outer Rim Constable's official. Raxian Assemble's official. And most importantly, Daedra is an official. So Daedra is an official, which is why I may consider playing this. And you know what? I think I will slot this in since it is an official unit. After that, I don't know what else I would want to play. I think I'm going to slot in the other FN Trooper Corps. Now, mind you, we have some other cards out of aspect that we may want to consider. And I'll take a quick look at that to see if there's any card that really looks strong. We've got, maybe Luthen's Hallcraft. That would cost 7. Probably not something I want to do. Nemec's Manifesto. Not going to have a ton of Rebel units, so it's not going to get any damage, but +1/+1. Probably not something I'm really interested in. And none of these other cards are something that I think are worthwhile even considering. So that would be our Daedra deck. And I think this is actually totally reasonable. Our curve looks good. We've got, just as a reminder, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 turn 1 plays. Jar Jar doesn't really count just because it's pretty weak. So I could add, the other Outer Rim Constable. This isn't like a particularly great turn 1 unit, so I'm going to just keep one in there. Maybe we include the other one in a sideboard game. So that's pretty solid. But that curve on turn 1 looks great. In terms of 3-drops, we got a ton of Academy Disciplinarians work amazing with Contraband Starhopper. It also works great with Daedra, so I'm happy about that. We also have cards like ISB Shuttle, which can give us a little bit of value. In terms of 4-drops, right, we have a nice curve because we can curve into Elia Kane, so I do like that, or Arinda Price on the Daedra turn, or we can just drop an Unveiled Might on the Daedra turn from Plot, which is probably going to give her the rate 2. So that's very, very aggressive. And then we can follow up with, well, the FN Trooper Core, just playing it from hand, giving experience over to Daedra, and then we have a really, really powerful Daedra that's a problem for opponents to deal with. So I like that game plan of kind of going all in on Daedra with this deck. It's going to be really, really solid. So overall, very aggressive. We got a little bit of Sentinel interaction. We got a good amount of space units. We've got some solid upgrades and some decent interaction, as well as a powerful leader. This looks great. I think I'm going to go ahead and save this, and let's go ahead and try out a couple of games with this. Alrighty, into the first game. I don't actually know if we're going to be able to play a couple of games. I think they require you to build your deck and then play your games. So we may be able to build out a secondary deck after we play one game. This first hand, I mean, we have Jar Jar as a turn 1 play, but that's pretty weak, so I do not want that. I'm going to mulligan to see if I can pick up a better turn 1 play here. Outer Rim Constable is better. We do have the Contraband Starhopper, however, which I think I want to play on turn 1, especially with the Republic Oryx Starfighter. So really, really kind of powerful 1-2. And then I think I'm going to resource the Outer Rim Constable since we do have kind of a turn 1 and turn 2 play. Gonk Power Droid can be a little bit scary just because my opponent can start scaling up and getting some really, really solid units down. Let's go ahead and resource the Republic Warwalker. As a reminder, we do have that Jar Jar in the resource pile, so that's going to be really nice. Let's go and attack with the Contraband Starhopper. Then we're going to play Ando Commission. So they got a Sentinel, which can be very obnoxious. So that's something to consider with the Daedra here. Nubian Starskiff. Honestly, this seems like just I'm going to go full on space unit in this game and then use Cruel Commandos as a Sentinel to potentially block some of the damage that my opponent's going to be doing. So let's go ahead and just attack in. Normally, I would want to get Daedra down and start getting in some big chunks here, but I don't even know if that's really something I want to do immediately. You know, they're going to create a spy token here, and their units are going to get really big here because of Mon Mothma, so that can get a little bit scary. But I'm going to deploy the Nubian Starskiff. They've got Junior Senator. We're going to take initiative here, so they've really flooded the board here. Whereas what we're going to do, and I'm going to resource this Raxian Assembly because I don't think I'm going to want to play that, is we are going to, let's see, play, we're going to play out the Cruel Commandos here. Just drop in a Sentinel. They're going to attack it with their Sentinel. That's totally fine. We're going to go ahead and deploy Daedra here. They're taking out the Cruel Commandos. So again, that just kind of traded for 2. I'm going to immediately attack in with the Nubian Starskiffs since I get the Restore 2 on here. They're going to play Lone Shark, which is going to ambush the Daedra, which is totally fine because now our Daedra has the raid 2, so we're going to get in for 4. I do like that. They're probably going to knock out the Daedra. That's fine. Again, they've kind of traded with a couple of units here. And we're going to be keeping on with our, space game plan. We're not under a ton of pressure here. Next turn, we can drop in another space unit in Crucible, which is going to give an experience token to all these units. And that should probably take the win here since they don't have enough damage on the ground arena to really do anything. They did get a lot of value here since they did play early units like the Ando Commission. We get a second Academy Disciplinarian. So the question here is, I don't think I want the FN Trooper Core. How much damage can I do? So this is 4. This is 2. This is another 2. So that's 8. If I give an experience token, that's 11. If I go with the Academy Disciplinarian, that's +3 and then +2. So it's 5. So it's actually going to be more worthwhile to go ahead and play out the Academy Disciplinarians here instead of the Crucible. So I'm actually going to play out the Academy Disciplinarian now because it's going to be an official so that I can ready up the Oryx Starfighter and then also get the Restore 2 in with the Nubian Starskiff. And again, my opponent probably doesn't have ways to interact with this because they're all space units. They're going to need some sort of space unit of their own to attack them, or they're going to need something that's going to allow them to straight up remove it And in their color combination, they may have some damage dealing stuff, but outside of that, it's going to be unlikely for them to deal with it. And look at that. Yeah, sure. They put a couple Sentinels in the ground, but we didn't care about it because we got a bunch of space units here and we're going to be able to close out the game. So seems pretty solid here in game number 1 with our Daedra green deck. And we didn't even get a whole lot of, Unveiled Mites or value out of Daedra, period. So really quickly, I wanted to go over kind of the secondary option I was thinking. First off, we could have replaced Daedra with Yularen and had a 4/6, which I think would also be pretty reasonable. I don't think I would change like anything about the deck because it would be the same color combinations. I would still want to play Aggression. I would still want to play Command. I would just be running a different leader, which I think would be just slightly worse in most situations. But the other leader I was considering was Leia. Now with Leia, I would have to run Aggression because that would be the biggest card pool. I would definitely slot in all of these Heroism units. And if you just look, I would be able to play Senator Chuchi, and I would be able to play Armor of Fortune, Defense Fleet X-Wing, Disciples Devotion, Wilro Hood, a couple Bardot and Ornithopters. I don't think I would actually play Charge with Murder because we don't have double Vigilance all that often. But I would also probably play Donnie Pilgrim. And then as we go up to Aggression here, I would also be playing all 4 of these units, and then literally every single unit besides one of the Pursue the Lead. And what would be interesting about this is we would have all of these Aggression units. So all these Academy Disciplinarians, these Outer Rim Constables, the Contraband Starhopper. If we were to draw any of our Vigilance or any of our Heroism cards, they would immediately get an experience token or have the ability to get an experience token. So we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 cards that we would have in our deck that would allow them to get experience tokens. And the rest of the cards would be Aggression or potentially Aggression Heroism. And if it was Aggression Heroism, some of these cards wouldn't be able to, but you would have to draw like an Armor of Fortune or Bardot and Ornithopter or Donnie Pilgrim in order for that to function. So all that said, we would have a really nice way to just consistently gain a ton of value with your experience tokens as you go along. And I think that would work excellently as well. I do think Academy Disciplinarian gets a lot weaker in that style of deck because you're going to be giving extra experience tokens. Are they worthless? No, you can still go turn 1 Contraband Starhopper, attack, Academy Disciplinary, attack again, put an experience token on something later on and kind of go that plan. Or even something as simple as, you go turn 1 Donnie Pilgrim, put an experience token on it. Next turn, you play the Academy Disciplinarian, you can ready it up, turns into a 2/3. That can be an option. There are some other, things associated with this, but I think Leia would also be kind of the secondary option that I'd be going with. Another leader that you could consider, I would be looking into maybe some sort of cunning secondary aspect. I think the Loan Sharks can be really good, and Duchess Investigators are really, really powerful common. This thing is a 5 resource 4/4 that you disclose a cunning card, and they discard a card at random. At random is the key here. Usually your opponent's going to have 2 to 3 cards in at that point, and you could discard their absolute bomb, and it can be absolutely devastating. So I think that's really, really strong. But I do think the Unveiled Mites and the command direction is a very, very big thing to miss out on. So I think between the Leia or the Daedra/Yularen, I think the Daedra/Yularen is a little bit more powerful. I was excited about Leia. I was looking at all the aggression and everything, but there was also a lot of command as we were noticing. And I think that just because you can play a leader within the aspect and go with both of them, you're in a good spot. Again, if we harken back to the kind of themes that I pointed out at the beginning of the video, I'm thinking about the quantity, I'm thinking about my main aspect and support aspect, whether or not a leader is good enough to go away from, a certain grouping of cards. And in this case, I think Daedra and Yularen, I think Daedra is a little bit more powerful, but I think Daedra and Yularen are both solid leaders and decently strong to the point where it's not worth it going out of my way for a Leia when I already have a good leader that can fit both card pools together that are strong, right? That's kind of the decision you need to make. And in this case, I think it paid off pretty nicely. Overall, the set looks incredibly fun, and I am excited to see what we come up with in these formats. Hopefully you all enjoyed. Let me know if it helped in the comment section down below, or let me know if you're excited about your pre-release down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.